prevention think tank. They were created by SAMHSA, the SAMHSA think tank, and the International Credentialing and Reciprocity Consortium. They're guided by the core prevention values and competencies. They provide models of exemplary behavior. They recognize our responsibility to the field and promote trust from society and those that we serve. In just a moment, we'll review how they're laid out in the document. But before that, I'd like to review the DECIDE decision-making model, which we will be using to navigate through the scenarios later in the later sections of the training. So, as far as the ethical decision-making model, this model is aptly named as it lays out a familiar and memorable protocol for making ethical decisions. Again, we will be using this model as a guide in our breakout rooms during the second half of today's presentation. So as is said, decide is the mnemonic, and then D is define the problem. You attempt to be clear and specific when you're defining that problem. E is entertain all possible solutions, and oftentimes there are several potential solutions. C, you compare each option and their associated consequences. I, identify your decision or the best and select the best decision for everyone involved. So that's considering all of your sector representation if you're collaborating with people across sectors. Then D, design and implement an action plan. So you create the plan, intervention, and/or prevention strategy that you want to implement. Then E, evaluate the results. So questions to keep in mind are, did the anticipated consequence happen? Would you implement the same protocol later on if you had the opportunity, or make a different decision next time? Then I'll move into the actual prevention code of ethics. So this is what the Prevention Think Tank Code of Ethical Conduct looks like at a glance. A copy will be accessible for you all to reference during the breakout rooms activities, where we will discuss some of the scenarios as they pertain to these ethical principles. You'll also get a copy of this as a part of the package of materials that will be emailed to you at the end of the presentation.
Thank you.
So for this next part, I really felt it was important to give everyone the opportunity to read through the preamble carefully. It's just to consider how thoughtful and deliberate they were as they introduced the Prevention Code of Ethics. So I'll give you all about a minute or 30 seconds just to briefly scan through that. All right, I don't want to rush anyone, but because I'm like a super slow reader. But some of the highlights in this are just that there's a commitment to a selfless pursuit of public welfare. So again, it's that moral imperative within the human service profession. There's the obligation to collaborate with the community in providing for the service recipients, so the people who you're working for. And then the tenets outlined throughout the Code of Ethics are to be strived for, and they should not be deemed as like limiting or a restriction. And then these will obviously be unpacked in the ethical principles that follow. So as far as the 6 guiding principles, I'm going to review the 6 guiding principles quickly because we cover them in greater detail in our previous ethics trainings, which can be accessed online, and then we will run them later on throughout the year. It is important that we all have an understanding of these, because in the second part of the training, again to reiterate, we will be going into breakout rooms and we will be identifying which of these ethical principles are at play in the various scenarios that we'll be reviewing. So for the principles, non-discrimination, all people should be treated fairly, irrespective of their identity. And in order to do this, to implement it, comply with anti-discrimination laws and regulations, and also go out and seek some additional information, either like through your own research or like some work sponsored event. Then competence, seek to gain mastery in your subject area and recognize the gaps in your knowledge. And then as soon as you reach that gap, refer to subject matter experts. Then be mindful of reporting unethical conduct in your surroundings in terms of like the people that you engage with professionally. Integrity, you provide accurate information. Give credit where it's due for ideas, information, and materials that you've used that you have not produced or that you've modified or adapted. And so just always give credit. Maintain honesty and transparency through service delivery. So that's communicating, a part of that is communicating the potential unanticipated consequences with service recipients, just so that they're aware of like what they're getting involved in. Nature of services is to protect participants from harm, report any evidence of abuse if you experience it like amongst your colleagues, then provide services in which you have confidence or there is an evidence base. Confidentiality, you properly secure records of service recipients of activity, of activity participants. So anyone involved in the work that you're doing, just secure their information and secure their records. Protect sensitive information with special consideration given when analyzing and disseminating data gathered from a small cohort of people, especially if those people happen to be of vulnerable populations. And again, we do have an ethics and data collection training that we run. So if you'd like more information there, you can reach out to us, and we can there will be more trainings offered. Some of it is available online, but that's available. And then there's the ethical obligations to community and society. So with this principle, it's about being proactive in understanding public and organizational policy, staying abreast of how policy affects service access, or how people access services, the delivery of that service, and people's individual welfare. And then adopting both a personal and professional stance that promotes health. And now we'll go through like a grounded example of what these ethical like principles have meant to prevention professionals that we've encountered. So Carolyn Wilson of Ledgelight Health District, she noticed some misinformation on a billboard as it displayed a message that called homegrown cannabis as safe as homegrown tomatoes. Pretty ridiculous. As she explains in her social media post, that claim is blatantly false. She also shared that she felt obligated to address this inaccurate comparison because of her position as a prevention professional who seeks to raise awareness and promote health. So this can be seen in like the post that she put up and some of the messages and comments that she engaged in below that post. So now back to Ken, and he will cover some information on the various community sectors that are crucial in prevention work and especially when working through the strategic prevention framework.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I really like that last slide on Principle 6, obligations with Carolyn Wilson on that. I kind of think of that principle as like if you walk the walk, talk the talk, talk the talk, walk the walk. So let me just share my screen. So Prevention work's complicated because we're using evidence-based strategies such as community-based coalitions, which require multi-sector partners, each of whom may have different areas of expertise in order to arrive at solutions. And many of us working with these community coalitions collaborate with all these different sectors that you see represented in this graphic here. And we recognize that ethical behavior is closely tied to our work. Oops. So our coalitions are representative of the communities we serve, and as a result, they're comprised of diverse people with different perspectives and have a different set of ethical conduct and obligations. People may also have different values based on their religious beliefs. All these differences are great things. The most important thing, though, despite all of these differences, we all are doing prevention in some way, and we're using a group process in order to do it. One thing that I hope everyone walks away with today is that it's important to increase our awareness of our partners in the different sectors that we work with, and to recognize that it's more than just our own obligations, that factor into these responsible ethical decisions that we're making. So I'm going to encourage everybody today to think like an anthropologist and to treat the sectors with an anthropologist like lens. Cultural anthropologists study how people who share common cultural systems organize and shape their physical and social world around them, and in turn, others shaped by those ideas, behaviors, and physical environments. So I'd like everybody to just take a moment, and if you would put in the chat box, what are some things that come to your mind when we think about culture and what it means? So I'll give everybody just a minute or so to put that in the chat. And while you're doing that, I love this quote here by Margaret Mead: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Pretty inspiring for people that do our kind of work. So let's see the chat here. Norms and celebrations, religion, family, traditions, language. These are great. Yep. Healing, family, environment, ritual. Excellent. So here's, just a few of some of the stuff that, I had thought of, and some of the stuff we saw in the chat box just now. But think about like economics with the community sector. How might economics influence how different sectors make decisions or how they might behave? Perhaps, is there funding available for police departments or school budgets? Maybe if there aren't money in those budgets, then maybe certain activities they wouldn't be able to do. So it can kind of help you understand some of their decision-making process. Politics, navigating a chain of command and understanding where interest lies. We see the chain of command come up a lot in, anybody that's ever worked with school systems. When things have to, school surveys, for instance, there's usually a chain of command that has to be followed when working with youth in the schools. History, every sector has a history, and the quicker that you're able to understand the history of that sector, the quicker you might be able to understand some of their behaviors or thought processes. Environment, spatially, where does the sector operate? Where there might be overlaps in other sectors, do meeting locations, for instance, suit certain sectors more than others? And then lastly, language. A lot of these we have the same concepts, but they may be called different things across different sectors. But gaining this kind of understanding will be helpful in resolving ethical conflicts, and building these relationships is also key when we're thinking of sustainable initiatives in our communities. So let's take a moment and just connect a few of these dots, because you might be asking yourself, how does all this relate to the SPF? So as prevention professionals, we use the SPF as a process and as a unit of analysis for our work. And even if some of you aren't familiar with the SPF, it's not a very complicated process. There's 5 steps to it: assessment, capacity, planning, implementation, and evaluation, with cultural competency and sustainability considered through each of these steps. But I like to think of it in its most basic form. If you think of, cooking something, the first step, assessment, you're looking in the fridge. What do you have to work with? Capacity, what do I have to go out and get, or what can I make substitutions for? Planning, now it's time to, get your recipe down. Implementation, now you're cooking it. Evaluation, now we're trying it. If it's good, we'll keep it. Process worked, maybe it's not too good, and we'll have to make some adjustments. So each step of this model involves working with different sectors of the community, which means many different perspectives and behaviors are brought to the table. Ethical decisions are not a simple judgment call. Rather, they are a group process. So that's the lens that we'll use today when we're approaching some of these ethical scenarios that we'll be navigating. So with that, I'm gonna bring it back to David. Does anybody have any questions so far before we start getting into the steps of the SPF and some scenarios? Nope. All right.
Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So moving on, we're going to start with the first step of the SPF, which is assessment. Many of the new PCC coalitions have just completed the needs assessment process. So some of you are in fact familiar with this data collection process. Yet I'll provide a refresher. It typically goes as follows. You collect data to assess needs, identify intervening variables, assess community readiness, develop your problem statement, and gauge your group's cultural competence. And cultural competence will be a through line throughout every step, just because it is one of those steps that you always have to keep in mind. In this section, we will review a scenario that you could encounter during the assessment step of the SPF. Then ask ourselves some foundational guiding questions to consider, identify and address the most relevant ethical principles as they pertain to the scenario, and then we'll unpack and elaborate on the relevance, and we'll actually be posing that question to the group. Then we'll finally use the decide ethical decision-making process to reevaluate our approach and better align our actions with our ethical principles. And during this first step, I will be doing the majority of that. It's like thought that we put in prior to, but in the later steps, we will be giving y'all the task to take it on. So the assessment scenario. So this is the scenario that we'll be working through. Mary just started her first job as a prevention coalition coordinator. The first thing she plans to do as part of the needs assessment process is to gather all the existing data related to substance use in her community. Since there is no high school risk survey data available in her community, it's hard for Mary to prioritize which substances and behaviors to focus prevention efforts around. She's figured she would make her own short survey and distribute it to students with a small incentive at the next home football game. Some questions that I'd like everyone to keep in mind as we move forward are: does Mary's approach put the youth who participate in her survey in harm's way? Or does Mary's approach endanger youth survey participants? What if she were to survey parents instead at the same venue, this home football game? And is there a better approach to obtaining this sort of data? And these are things that we'll kind of like flesh out as soon as we go through the slides. So a question that we wanted to ask the group is which principle from the Prevention Code of Ethics is relevant to this situation? And feel free to answer it in the chat and give you a few seconds. All right. So some of the ones that we considered were competence and nature of services and confidentiality in terms of obligations for community and society. Before I go ahead, did you want to like elaborate? I don't. It's Higgins. Yes. Yeah. Did you want to unmute yourself? It's fine if you.
Well, I think it's our, if they're coming to us, it's our obligation to a community and society to get treatment or help for her. So that's, to me, that's an ethical obligation that I would think is, you know,
Oh.
with the,
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
yeah. No, that's an interesting framing of it. So like to help Mary, like conduct a better survey. Is that the obligation that we would? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. We didn't frame it in that way in the discussions that we had prior to this. It was like nature of services, just that it may or may not be coercive to incentivize the students to take the survey. And then confidentiality, it's a small group of students who attend those games, so they could easily be identified if the data is analyzed and then disseminated. But in terms of like what's incumbent upon us as like prevention professionals, that makes a lot of sense in terms of ethical obligation to like the community and the society. So yeah, that's really refreshing. um so so now in this first scenario, I'll run through what we came up with, and as we went through the decide model, you all will run through the model in small groups during the second half of the training. So first and foremost, in our practice, we want to make sure that we protect youth. So as we proceed, we have to keep that in mind while we're going through this model. So step one, define the decision to be made. And recall, we're trying to be as clear and specific as possible. And then what we identified there was what is the best and most responsible option for collecting data from students. And then step two, entertain all possible options. Again, often there are many options, yet for the sake of time, we will only discuss two options. We'll only discuss two. There is to meet and collaborate with school admin to discuss administering a school-wide survey, or collaborate with PTO groups to administer a survey to parents. And then in the backdrop is that we offered incentives to students at school sporting events to participate in the survey. Then the C step, we compare each option and its associated consequences. With the current approach, it does not protect youth and could damage relations with the school. And as schools are a member of like a member of the community, like a crucial member of the community, and they safeguard students from unimpeded access from the public. So they protect students, and we want to honor and recognize that. Then as further than that, the school survey may take longer to plan, but will lead to collaborative working relationships with school admin and provide richer data to be analyzed and used in a needs assessment. Then as far as running a parent survey, it would be less cumbersome because there would be less like kind of bureaucratic things that are kind of keeping you and preventing you from getting through quickly. And then it would be feasible to implement in the setting that we talked about, like at a football game or a sporting event. Then as far as identifying the decision to be made, in this model, we're choosing to do both, where we would, in the short term, run a parent survey to get data as fast as possible. And then in the long term, plan that student survey and implement that student survey to ensure that we have a collaborative working relationship with the schools. Then we would design, and then sorry. Designing and implementing the plan. For the parent survey, we'd collaborate with PTOs and or safegrad groups throughout the town. And for the student survey, we develop relationship with school officials, begin to plan that student survey. And then in terms of evaluating, we do some process evaluation and some like outcome evaluation. So for the process stuff, it would be identify and implement, track, outreach, and organizing efforts with PTO, safegrad, and school admin so that you know that you're reaching this goal. Then collaboratively set goals with the school admin or whoever you're working with when you're developing this survey. For survey development, then the administration of the survey, analysis of the survey, and then dissemination of the results. So always working together with all of the people who like were the actual gatekeepers to these communities. Then track and report those accomplishments so that people there's some buy-in there all of the time. And altogether, Mary's intentions may have been good, but her protocol put youth in harm's way. And again, our mission is to protect youth, and then that applies to any service recipient beyond the scope.
And I'll just add to David that with that scenario, I like that one because when you consider, there's a few sectors that are coming into play in that scenario. You have the parent sector, you have the school sector, and the youth sector, right? But there's slightly different like approaches and protocols that have to be made for each of those sectors. Like we talked about the chain of command with the school, like you mentioned, that protocol is a little bit different than with the parents. So thanks, that was great.
Yeah, so I'll turn it over to you, Ken.
Thanks, David. Anybody have any questions before we're going to do one more scenario before we take a short break? No questions. All right. All right, so we're going to go into capacity now. And like David said before, we're going to use the DECIDE model, but you guys will be a little bit more providing some of the answers that we put in here this time. So capacity, again, like we mentioned earlier, we're measuring community readiness and determining, now what we need in our organization to move forward before we get to planning and implementation. So this next scenario, Tina is a coalition coordinator who is trying to network with folks in her community in order to build capacity for her prevention efforts. The mayor agreed to have dinner and drinks with Tina to discuss prevention strategies. Tina was pleased with their conversation, and the mayor agreed to connect her with various institutions and organizations in their community. Tina paid for the check using project funds. So is there anything unethical about this meeting scenario? And we'll put a couple spins on this too while we're thinking about this. So I'd like to open this up to you guys and have a little bit of a discussion, but here we go. This coalition coordinator finally got a meeting with the mayor. So this could be very helpful for building some capacity. Do we think that her decision was the best one to go out to dinner to network like this and pay for drinks? I'd like to hear from some of you. You can either put it in the chat box or if you raise your hand or just unmute yourself, feel free to talk. well, let's ask this. What scenario do we have it in play here? Terry, I just saw you come on camera. Would you like to share your thoughts with us?
Trying to unmute, yes. Well, I'm
Oh no, I think
really
Terry,
appropriate.
there you go.
Am I unmuted?
Yep, you were just freezing on us a little bit.
Oh,
I think
sorry.
you're back.
So I don't think it would be particularly appropriate to pay for drinks with prevention funds. And I think the whole scenario would probably have been more appropriate for her just to make an appointment with the mayor and meet him in his office or invite him to her office.
Now, what if we, would you feel the same way if we took like the drinks off of the scenario? What if it was just like what if it was just paying for a meal? Would that change anything?
In situations like this, I just personally feel more comfortable keeping money out of the scenario. And I think, yeah, for me, I just would keep it separate and simple.
Yep, avoid any kind of potential for conflict. Yeah. Excellent. Anybody else want to share? I see.
Well, hi Terry. This is Elke from Danbury. So I agree with Terry. Dinner and drinks seems, especially with the drinks and utilizing funds towards that. I'm also a big advocate for boundaries. So working within the work period or the work time frame of not only the mayor, but the prevention workers as well. So I would definitely follow through in regards to a meeting within the work hours, whether it's in the office of the mayor or the office at prevention.
Yep. Excellent. Anybody else? All right, I'll show you what we so yeah, and I think you guys touched on everything here. Meet in a more professional setting, current approach without alcohol and or without using project funds. So compare the current approach may be violating policies, definitely, and that's definitely important to think about whenever you're using coalition funds. Professional setting is ideal, but it may not suit your schedule. And that's very common too, especially for, some people in positions like a mayor, their, daytime hours may be super booked. So although, going out to dinner, maybe you just pay with your own money or something like that. So the best decision, either professional setting or pay separately without consuming alcohol, design, implement, plan, reschedule that meeting for different ways. So I think you guys got all the big ones on that. They're going to get, these scenarios are going to get progressively harder when we come back from our brief break that we'll be taking in just a moment. So before we take a break, I just want to make sure, does anybody have any questions about the decide model? Because that's what you will be using in the breakout rooms, as well as identifying the principle, the ethical principle that is in play. So those will be your two tasks when we come back. But if there aren't any questions, then we'll go ahead and take a short break, and we'll come back at 11 o'clock and we'll go to our first breakout room. All right, I will put up a timer in just a moment, and I'll see everybody in 10 minutes.
I'm in a training.
Okay.
Yes, I'm in a training. Thank you though, for checking up on me.
All right, we'll wait one more minute, let everybody get back here. So I'm just wondering if anybody else on the call today is or comes from an anthropology background. If you are, give us a reaction or put it in the chat. David and I both are come from cultural anthropology backgrounds. I'm not seeing anything. All right, we'll give it like 30 more seconds. Okay, I got 11 o'clock, so we'll get back to work here. Okay, so I'll just explain how this is going to work. We're going to read through the scenario together as a big group in just a moment, and then we will be going into 3 breakout rooms, and we'll be in the rooms for about 12-13 minutes discussing the scenario. You'll be, David will put in the chat box a link before we go into the break rooms, which will have the DECIDE model. It will have the ethical principles as well as the scenario for you all to read. But we will, just to make sure that everybody, that the link works. Sometimes they work on the dry run and then you go to the actual event and there's some issues. So we'll, at the start of the breakout rooms, kind of float around and make sure that each of the rooms is able to access all of that. Okay, so let me just share my screen. We'll take a look at this first scenario. Okay, so here we are. We are now into the planning phase. So selecting our evidence-based interventions, establishing some of the outcomes, coming up with a logic model to develop a plan by. So here we go. At your last coalition meeting, several school officials stated that they were looking for a new drug and alcohol curriculum for their high school students. After some investigating, you were able to find a very comprehensive curriculum available for free. After review, everyone on the coalition was pleased with the quality of the curriculum. Then a coalition member stated that they were familiar with this curriculum and that it was funded and produced by a major pharmaceutical company that makes opioids. So some of the guiding questions that we'll take a look at are, what ethical principle is relevant to the scenario? Is it appropriate to use this curriculum knowing this new piece of information about the pharmaceutical company? Does this affect your decision at all? Maybe it doesn't. But I'd like us to have a conversation about this in the breakout rooms. And also, I'd like everyone to use a few moments of the breakout room to introduce yourself to one another, because part of the idea here today is to network with some of our prevention colleagues as well. So please take a few moments to do that. And give me just a moment to get everybody into breakout rooms.
And how you,
Hi, everybody. Were you
never,
able, sorry, was everybody able to pull that link up okay? Okay, excellent.
I didn't try.
No, I
I didn't mean to come and interrupt your introductions.
Ollie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Holly. I work for the Vernon Rocks Coalition, which is a part of the Village for Families and Children. And I'm the prevention support specialist.
Karen, how about you? Good to see you. You have to unmute.
Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, nice to see you, Terry. Yeah, I'm Karen Ravenel Bloom, and I am the Director of Prevention at the Wind and Pride Coalition in Willimantic.
Somebody else want to go next?
Hi, my name is Shakir. I'm working for the town of Manchester. I'll also be hired under the grant. I'll be working with Vernon Rocks as well. Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Welcome. Bridget, how about you?
Hi, everyone, I'm Bridget Aliaga-Briand. I am the program manager for the Substance Exposed Infants statewide initiative that's funded through DMIS and DCF.
Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Julie Higgins. I work for the Department of Corrections as a substance abuse counselor. And I run the MAT program here,
Oh,
and I do the Recovery Coach Academy, teaching inmates how to be a recovery coach.
God bless you for your work.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
And I see that Ashley, her microphone, she does not have a microphone, but she works for Manchester Manor.
And my name's Terry. I used to be in Danbury working with the local coalition in Danbury, Stand Together, Make a Difference. I worked for MCCA, and I have since moved to Denver.
Oh.
So I maintain my certified prevention specialist certification, and that's why I'm on this training, just to keep up to date and learn more. I'm currently serving as a life coach for an agency here in.
Great to see you, Terry.
Thank you.
All right, so what do we all think of this scenario? Would you like me to pull it back up?
Please.
Okay.
please.
Give me just a second to get it up here. Okay. All right, so can everybody see that okay? Excellent. So here's the situation where, you find a curriculum that's free for a school, which, can sometimes be a challenge. And it seems like a very good curriculum. However, someone points out to you that this is a curriculum that's, produced by a pharmaceutical company that makes opioids. Perhaps it was part of the, of the damage control that they had to do after the opioid epidemic. Would you be comfortable using a curriculum like that, knowing that the source of where it came from? How does everybody feel about that? Would you feel like you're kind of taking like dirty money, if you will, like in that kind of sense, like it's coming from the people that caused some of this problem?
I think off face value, I would feel very uncomfortable with it, just because we know the opioid industries and pharmaceutical industries history and stuff like that. I think it would be dependent on the curriculum itself, actually reading into it. Is there any bias that's evident and stuff like that? And I think I would want to know why they created this curriculum. Was it in response to the opioid epidemic and stuff like that, or do they have ulterior motives as well? And then obviously based on those contributing factors, decide if it's practical or not.
I would feel completely comfortable using their money because money's money. No, I really would. The Department of Public Health is the one in Connecticut that has administered tobacco cessation grants, which have been funded by, big tobacco. But it's enabled us to do some great work in Connecticut with helping people get off of nicotine products. And I think I've mentioned before, in Danbury, we actually partnered with a wine and beer retail outlet to do some public service announcements on the radio, because they want to be seen as folks who promote responsible drinking. So I think there's different ways you can partner with people in this regard.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the other thing too is, if you don't have money in your budget too, and this is the only thing that is available if you were on the fence, maybe something's better than not having anything at all, regardless of where, the program came from. I get that. Now, let me put a little bit of a spin on this, because something that, I'm not going to say it's common, but it is something that, you will see from time to time. What if you used grant money to purchase a new, curriculum for the district, but then not all of the steps of that curriculum are followed? What if it's only, 3 of the 5 steps, or if it's supposed to be like a 3 or 4 year program and it's only getting a fraction of that? How do you feel about that?
Then you're not following or maintaining any kind of fidelity, and you're not going to get the desired results. If you implement a curriculum, you need to implement the entire curriculum and know that you have the capacity to do that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And I'm glad you brought up mention fidelity, because yeah, that's exactly it. If it's a program that is developed and it's a, you know, a 5-step or series program, yeah, then it lost its value when you're not executing it the whole way, or the proper way.
I will also jump in for something on that too.
Then I just need it.
Can you guys hear me? Karen from Wyndham Pride?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'll just talk about experience from, this was from years ago, when I was doing, we had a curriculum and, I was trained in the curriculum, and it's a pretty extensive, pretty long series, but it was an after-school program. And so there would be situations where, it's a little challenging because sometimes kids are entering your group setting a little bit later because they had homework help, or parents are picking them up early, or there's snowstorms, and then, everything gets switched around in the year. So I felt like there were times that I had to work with the tools the best way I could, and try and get the most I could out of it. And, really, as you came towards the end and the students are putting together their little activities, look at the big picture as a whole. Was it the perfect, of a 13-week session? Maybe not, but feeling like I think still a lot of students got what they could with, given the time, given all the other kind of, things that could just throw it off a bit. So, but, and also that they felt like they were part of this group. They knew that they were part of this group that was doing these prevention things. And in the end, they felt like, yeah, I'm learning these things. So these were more with, upper elementary or early middle school students. So sometimes I think it depends on situations and given your roles in the schools, et cetera.
Thanks for sharing that, Karen. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to look in the chat box. Ashley would have to see if there was any bias with the medications they produce. Okay, going back to the pharmaceutical curriculum or made by them. Okay, anybody else wanna weigh in on here? All right, I'm just going to broadcast a message that we will be closing rooms shortly, so just bear with me one moment. Okay. I always get nervous working breakout rooms. I don't know why. I think I messed them up one time in a training, and I've always felt cursed since then. I hope everybody's enjoying the spin that we put on the ethics training today across the SPF. We're trying to keep it interesting.
Appreciate your work.
Thanks, Terry. All right, so I'm going to, I think we can, sorry, I'm just trying to, did you guys see a message come across that the rooms would be closing when I sent that? Oh, you did, okay, just didn't show on mine. Excellent. All right, I think I'm going to bring everybody back.
Hi, sorry, Ken, my internet cut out.
No worries.
So I like couldn't just drop from the group. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yep, here we go. We're gonna be, I think we're going back to the main room now. We should be. All right, welcome back, everybody. I'd like to hear, David, could you tell us a little bit about how your breakout room went? Or have someone from your team report back?
If someone would like to report back from my group, then I will gladly give reins. Daniela, I see that you turn your camera on. I don't know if you're willing.
I'm sorry, I just got here. I missed what was said.
Oh, yeah, sorry. It was just to report back what we did in our group, but if you're not, if you'd rather I do it, then it's fine.
Oh, sure, I can. So we just discussed the ethics around that and kind of had a conversation on more, I guess you could say, trust issues and how the community would feel accepting a program from a pharmaceutical company when they're the ones who kind of caused the harm already. So how do you, even if the program is super successful, how do you fully trust them in moving forward with this? Because even though they're trying to fix the problem, it's like they're still going to be selling their products and stuff. So that's kind of what we talked about.
Terry, would you mind sharing a little bit about in our group to offer a different perspective on it?
Sure. Well, I was one that said I would definitely take their money and use the comparison to big tobacco and, you know, how we know that they've been mandated to give X amount of dollars back to prevention, and the Department of Health in Connecticut is one who actually administers big tobacco cessation grants and the work that we've been able to do as a result of that. So that was one perspective. We talked a bit about maintaining fidelity within the curriculum. And Karen brought up some great points that, you know, you do the best you can do with the tools you have and the time you have and the people you're working with in order to implement and stick to a curriculum. So those were, I think, the major points, Ken.
Yeah, I think you got them. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So before we end up going to another breakout room, we're going to, David, would you like to pull up the Prezi and do the implementation?
Well, you didn't let our group share.
Oh, I'm so,
Oh,
I'm so sorry. Here I am moving right along. Please. Thank you for stopping me. Please share.
All right. We looked at it from a ethical obligation for community and society, and one of our definitions of defining the problem was it ethical to kind of, you know, deal with that. And I brought up, you know, I heard Terry mention big tobacco. I brought up in Indiana being aware that the tobacco industry had targeted the African American community in excess of 100 years, but they were also for over 25 years the sponsor of all Indiana Black Expo programming. And so when that came out, it was a real ethical question. And so Black Expo decided that they would sever their ties with them. So they no longer accept sponsorship from a big tobacco. And then one of the other things that we were wondering about, if the curriculum was evidence-based, if it was an evidence-based program, and could we use it if it wasn't? And we kind of decided that we couldn't, to be, as she said, in fidelity with our grant would require that we utilize evidence-based curriculums. And then one of the options would have been to partner with the sponsors of the grant, because they normally have resources and connections that could connect us with evidence-based curriculums that we could put in place. And I think that's about as far as we have. We were kind of split on whether we would utilize it or not, because, you know, tobacco, pharmaceuticals, you know, vaping, pharmaceuticals, kind of two different areas. But again, if you go back to what's the nature of our service and how we're supposed to represent the people, I was leaning towards that. I don't know if anyone else in the group wanted to comment. I don't want to speak for everyone. We're all relatively new, so we were kind of just going through it. So thank you for letting us share.
Oh yeah, thank you. I think it's great that you tied it back to, yeah, that ethical principle about obligations and everything like that. I think everybody hit all the big ones that we were hoping to spark discussions on, and, you know, the fidelity of the program and so on. So excellent job. I think I think the next breakout room, you guys are going to enjoy the scenario even more than that one. But before we get to that, I'll actually share my screen, David, and I'll just I'll go right through. We'll move ahead to the next step of the SPF here. Okay, everybody see that okay? Mm-hmm. Yes, good, thank you. So here we are, the implementation, my favorite step of the SPF. Boots are on the ground, we're out, we're working, getting our hands dirty in the community. This is, I think, most of us, our favorite part. So here we are again. We mentioned address fidelity and adaptation, and I was hoping that those words would come out in the first breakout room, and they sure did. So way to be on top of all this. So let's take a look at this scenario. We're not going to break out into groups for this one. We'll just kind of talk through this one. Matt works for a nonprofit organization and is the coordinator for a local prevention coalition. Throughout the year, many high school students volunteer at various community outreach activities. At the last event, one of the youth volunteers disclosed to Matt that she is concerned about her dad. He recently started vaping marijuana, and now he vapes daily for hours straight and sometimes lets her younger brother, who is 15, try some. How should Matt handle this situation? So sometimes when we are out working in the community and some of these different sectors and different coalition members are interacting with one another, you know, maybe a scenario like this does come up. So is Matt, is he mandated to report this? I'd like to hear from some folks on the call here, or you put in the chat box if you're not comfortable speaking. But what would you do in this scenario? I'm gonna stop sharing so I could see everybody for a moment. Oh, okay. Can I cold call on you?
So I'm thinking, because I am a mandated reporter by trade, that would be concerns. So to report, assess safety also, and assess further safety.
Anybody else? This can feel like a little bit tricky of a question because not all of us may be mandated reporters. So I see the comment, yep, marijuana is legal now. So knowing that piece about sharing with the younger brother who is 15, if that's shared with you, what would you do with that? Would that change how you would approach it? Higgins, I don't know if you want to. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Well, as a prevention specialist, I would encourage the individual just to sit down with his dad and try to educate the dad, with whatever tools the prevention specialist was able to convey with the kid. I would not feel like it was mandated reporting in any way. I think just a conversation, because a parent culturally, especially in within ethnic populations and communities that are really diverse, offering a child a glass of wine or something at dinner is often done, and they're under 18. Sorry. So I think education would be most effective in this situation.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in? I know some of these can kind of be a little bit, there's not really like a concrete right or wrong answer. If you're not a mandated reporter, I like the approach that you were saying, Terry, maybe reach out to family, but there's other considerations to make along the way of coming to the decision of how you're going to handle it. Like you were saying, you were bringing up some cultural things. Did I just cut somebody off?
Yeah, I just had an idea, Ken. In terms of like the risk assessment that Elke brought up, like just to assess the risk in the family, I think that would be the most appropriate like course of action, just because like the idea to educate also feels like it almost goes hand in hand with the social control that like to assess risk and then prescribe an intervention does, because like to educate also suggests that like what they're currently doing is inappropriate. So it's like, I think the appropriate course would just to be the like, whether or not like, is there something else that's going wrong in the family, in like the family unit? And that would be like maybe the first step. How that's done, I don't know, but.
Can I ask the question? I don't understand the terminology mandated reporter. What does that mean? Is that I don't know what that means.
So for instance, if like school teachers mandated reporter, they are bound by law to report certain things that illegal kind of things that would pose harm to the children or their family members or other people. So we may be working or have some folks on our coalition that are school teachers or may be mandated reporters. Certified prevention specialists, we are not considered or legally bound to be mandated reporters. So legally, we're not bound to report, but you want to make it best practice, obviously, if it's something that is posing harm or potential harm, that we should report and follow up with that. But I think this scenario was getting at a little bit that people from different sectors on your coalition may be bound and may be deemed mandated reporters, and other people in positions and from sectors on your coalition may not necessarily be mandated reporters. So just kind of understanding. I think social workers, David, you could speak to this a little bit more than me with your social work background. You would be deemed a mandated reporter as well.
Yeah, and that's okay. Yeah, so that's why I had like the question in terms of like how you would conduct a risk assessment, like actually like safely and respectfully. I think that would be like an interesting thing, like just an interesting question that comes to mind. But I think it would have been the right, like a good thing to do in this circumstance. But as you were saying, Valerie, sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say that just kind of surprises me that prevention specialists, especially as we are driven by ethical requirement to have integrity. I would think that if something that would endanger, like marijuana has the potential to endanger the young developing brain, I would think that ethically we would have a sense of duty to report. I would think, I'm also a pastor, so as a pastor, I have an obligation there to report. But it just surprises me that prevention specialists kind of, can kind of go both sides on that. I think the integrity standpoint that we would be fully obligated to mandated to report.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. And one of the things that in the statement for me was that the youth was concerned because the father was increasing in regards to usage of cannabis. So if she had concerns, I'm wondering decision-making skills and behavior on dad's part, right? So even though cannabis is legal for a 15-year-old, if he's providing the cannabis to his son at that age, what else is going on? That's why a safety assessment would be essential for me. And I could provide information to the youth, but once again, I wouldn't want to instill that much responsibility in a youth for something that could potentially be dangerous. I don't know that this is such tough scenarios and tough cases, these situations.
Cannabis is not legal in Indiana. I'm sorry.
That makes it easier, actually, I think. But how do you balance then the cultural differences within families for offering alcohol to youth at the dinner table, if that's culturally accepted and they're underage? How do we balance that? Because I kind of feel like, what right do I have to interfere with someone's cultural traditions or rituals or whatever? I can educate them, but in terms of reporting them for maintaining their culture, I don't know.
I think that goes back to your assessment of cultural readiness. Is the community ready for an environmental mind shift where it's not commonplace to offer our young people even alcohol, or because that's a big, in my opinion, a big battle, and you have to kind of assess if this is something that is going to be profitable to engage in. I mean, if everyone else is against it and you have no stakeholders that are sharing that same sentiment that, okay, it's not good. If the full culture feels that, okay, it's okay to offer kids marijuana or offer kids alcohol, then you've got an uphill battle. You have to really dig to find some like-minded people and really begin to kind of build that battle, so to speak, in my opinion.
I agree. Anybody else want to weigh in before we move on? Just in the interest of time, I don't want to. This is a great discussion. All right, we'll move on so we can definitely get to this last breakout room. I'll go ahead and share my screen one more time. Okay. So for this scenario, it's a little bit more unique, the approach that we took. We're going to show you just some data points, and we're going to have a discussion about this. So consider these data points from a high school risk behavior survey. Ever tried harming yourself? You see these percentages, and you can see how the non-binary, the students that identify as non-binary, are at much higher rates. And we have two more charts here. So 30-day vaping and alcohol 30-day use. So we can see again in this group that the students identifying as non-binary are using it at higher rates. Now on this graph right here on the right, I'd like you to pay attention to these N values of the sample size also, because this is going to come into play in our discussion as well with our talking points. So you can see that there's 957 males, 920 females, and 74 folks that identified as non-binary. So when we go into our rooms, I want us to consider these following questions, and we'll, David and I will, again, we'll go in and we'll share our screen in these rooms so that everybody has these questions. David, have these been provided in the link as well for this scenario?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay, great. So we want to know your initial thoughts. How would this data inform the prevention initiatives of your coalition? What ethical principle is in play when we're deciding how to look at this data and how to inform our prevention initiatives? Would it be unethical to not focus our efforts on this population that we've identified as a priority population? How does the N value or sample size influence the decisions that you would make? Does it influence the decision that you'd make? And if you're trying to have the maximum amount of behavior change, then do you not focus your efforts on the non-binary folks? Since there were only 74, I believe it was, is that too low of a number compared to the others to focus your initiatives? Do you have the capacity to accommodate an intervention with this group, with the coalition you're working with? And what are the obligations that you have to your funder? So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and give me just a minute to get us all into breakout rooms again. Bear with me just one moment. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So would you guys like me to pull that scenario back up so you can take a look at it one more time? Okay. Okay. So, many of us will be, if we're working with coalitions, we look at high school risk behavior data. And this may look pretty similar to what you see in your community, or it might not. But I was wondering if anybody wanted to start this off with some of your thoughts. So how would this data inform your prevention initiatives? Be the best place to start? Anyone want to kick it off? Well, let's start. Is that data concerning to, does that raise some eyebrows for people?
Is this a real data or this is just an example?
This is just an example of data. But I know when you do look across state data that you will find similar results.
Okay. Well, the samples vary drastically. Sorry. So I feel like it's comparable because for male and female, it's like around 20% and it's 50% for non-binary, but for the population sample, it's just comparable because the numbers are just different. There is a definite problem.
So would you, seeing this kind of data, would you, having identified a priority population, if these rates are higher, would you focus any efforts with your coalition to, with maybe some groups within the school to
Yes,
tailor
definitely. Definitely.
Okay.
However, it's always like good to remember that the population size it plays a role. But definitely some special effort considering that group, even though the sample size is small, but it's definitely an issue for that particular group, the non-binary.
Now, just to
address it as overall problem, not discriminating. You know what I mean?
Right. Now, what if the details of your grant and how your funding was set up, is to, you're to bring rates down, you have your outcome goals that you're supposed to hit. Now, if you're looking to make the maximum amount of change in usage rates in your community, and you see this kind of data, how would you prioritize your efforts? If someone could argue, oh, that's only 74 people. Why would you even invest time and resources in energy? Because it's really not going to bring down the overall usage rates that's for your target goal.
No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't discriminate. I mean, it's a significant percentage of that population. So, and like a specific group, they may have specific needs that, you know, the alcohol consumption or the vaping may have a different base than the other groups. You know what I mean? It could just stem from a different problem, underlying problem. So that could be a good maybe additional focus groups for this population to kind of see where this is coming from, why the alcohol consumption is so much higher in this population, even though the sample size was small. It shows like there definitely is a problem. So maybe a different approach for that particular group to address the problem would be a good idea.
Okay, yeah, I like that approach when you're, because yeah, you've identified the group, but then it's kind of like, what's the root cause, or what are some of the underlying causes? You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
other factors contributing.
It shows that there is something different for this particular group.
Yeah.
So just exploring that could probably be beneficial, I feel like.
And then the other part of this, this too, and a talking point that I wanted to have on this is, with those low sample sizes, you know, 74 students identifying as non-binary. I mean, there may be some areas or some districts where that number might only be, you know, 5 or 10. And now when you get numbers like that, and you are in your, you know, your information dissemination phase of the SPF, and that calls into concern some privacy and confidentiality aspects, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely. This is still very tricky. Just not to discriminate, however, to still address the problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, yeah, like just for this population, maybe not the survey. In a survey, they wanted to say that they belong to that group, but maybe they really don't want us to make known that they belong to that group, and it's a bit tricky. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. It definitely want to be, we want to make sure we're aware that whenever, yeah, it's small numbers of any, regardless of what the population that you are identifying in those small numbers, that you are protecting those the identities and confidentiality of those folks. So yeah, a few things going on in this that bring up some very good talking points and things to be mindful of when looking at your community data. I'm just going to take a moment and broadcast that we will be closing our rooms a little bit earlier, just because I didn't realize how little time we have left. So give me just a moment.
And while you're doing that, Ken, I was having microphone problems, so I'll just jump in quick. I agree with everything that you and Joanna had talked about. And I feel like this is something as a coalition or as a school, whoever's looking at this data to kind of look at and recognize, knowing that just you'll have to start, you know, with universal prevention, so overarching, you know, to kind of reach all populations. And then it's something you will have to watch and unpack a little bit further to try to get down to the root causes that might affect the non-binary population without kind of invading privacy or kind of bullying your way into find out like what's going on in your life type stuff. But it's definitely something at least if I saw this data in my community, I would want to, recognize it. But also, we don't have enough information to kind of just jump on it at the moment. So it's going to take a little bit of time to unpack, but definitely address the overall universal problem that, students in our district, whether they're male, female, non-binary, whatever they identify as, they're still using alcohol or vaping.
Thanks for jumping in there, Stephanie. All right, I am going to return us all, hopefully, to the main room here. We'll give everyone just another moment to get back to the main room here. I think there's a few more folks still coming back into the main room. All right. Oh, I think we still got a couple more people we're waiting for. Is it Del Rey? Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Would you like to say what your how your conversation went in your breakout room? Share with us.
Well, I guess I can. If none other in the group wants to share, I will. Of course, now I don't see the thing, but I'll go kind of go through what we thought. I was glad that it was identified as non-discrimination, so we dealt with that. So we looked at and we thought that the numbers were a clear indication that there was a problem in that, well, there were issues in that non-binary population. And now for me, I was a little bit skeptical because of the difference in the numbers. And I kind of wanted to know in society with identification and those who traditional identifiers, is the disparity in the numbers reflective of what the survey showed. So I would have to look, but it was a clear indication that yes, ethically, we would need to deal with that, and through education and trying to reduce the stigma of identification through the school systems as well as through the community. And I think the other thing that we dealt with was whether we thought that it would be unethical not to give this group a greater focus. We thought that it would be, knowing because of health disparities and the need for health equity, and obviously marginalized populations. COVID-19 exposed a lot of the disparities in health, especially with groups. Certain groups who have been marginalized are now prioritized. So we thought that, and I thought there was a obligation to our grantor, that especially since the move is for health equity and from our grantor. I thought that there was I'm saying I think we thought, I think they agreed, most of us agreed. And someone else can jump in. I don't want to speak for everybody. But yeah, I thought that we were obligated and that we had the resources as it's a high priority in our grant to deal with health equity.
There's some great points. I'm glad you brought up that health equity. And yeah, I mean, our group shared some of your same points that you were talking about too. So in the interest of, thank you for sharing with us. So in the interest of time, we are just about out of it. So I want to quickly just show you a few upcoming events that we have that may interest you. On 11/18, the folks at PGS, Problem Gambling Services, will be putting on gambling as a co-occurring disorder and current data, and we'll be helping them a little bit with that. On 11/30, TTASC will be putting on the 12 sector series. This sector that we'll be covering is our parents. And then the next installation of an ethics training that we have will be in the new year on 2022. We'll have ethics fundamentals. So if anybody's looking for another 2 hours of CEUs, that will be available in January. And then the last thing that I would like to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a evaluation link in the chat box right now, and I would greatly appreciate it if you could take this. It's very short, only about six questions about your experience here today. So with that, I hear the bells ringing that it's 12 noon, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you had a great time, and I hope to see you again.
Thanks for letting us join from Indiana.
Everyone.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.